Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us this evening. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this COVID town hall on behalf of the Black Coalition Against COVID. I'm Wayne Frederick, the president at Howard University, and the Black Coalition Against COVID includes Howard University College of Medicine, Morehouse College of Medicine, Meharry Medical College, Charles Drew University of Medicine and Science, the National Medical Association, the W. Montague Cobb Institute of the NMA, the National Black Nurses Association, the National Urban League, and blackdoctor.org. As I said, I'm Wayne Frederick. I'm president at Howard University. I also serve as the Charles Drew Professor of Surgery at our College of Medicine. I want to first start by thanking our sponsor, generous educational grant from BIO, the Biotechnology Innovation Organization, has made tonight possible. So it's my pleasure to introduce Congresswoman Robin Kelly from Illinois, and she's also the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus's Health Brain Trust. Welcome, Congresswoman Kelly.
Thank you so much, Dr. Frederick. Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be with you tonight. And on behalf of myself and my CBC colleagues, I'd like to thank you all for joining us for this very important discussion. As you've heard, my name is Robin Kelly, and I'm the vice chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee, which has jurisdiction over most of the healthcare legislation that goes through Congress. I also serve as a chair of the Congressional Black Caucus Health Brain Trust and Healthcare Policy Group, which evaluates healthcare legislation and works to tackle health disparities in our community. I am so inspired to be able to share a stage with all of you who are breaking barriers and making life better for all Americans. I'm so glad that we're having this important conversation about the impacts of COVID-19 in the Black communities across this country. Over the past year, we have watched firsthand as century-long systemic health and economic disparities have translated into higher rates of coronavirus and fewer resources to fight in the Black communities, which hopefully will change with the passage today of the American Rescue Act. COVID-19 did not create these disparities, it's just made them plain for all to see. Inequality comes in many forms, but health inequalities are among the most glaring. Fighting health inequalities is one of my top priorities in Congress because every person in this country, regardless of race or gender, deserves the opportunity to live a long, healthy life and to have access to the best health care available. Unfortunately, in many Black communities, that is not the case. We already know this, but COVID has certainly worsened the situation. We have seen some of the worst health outcomes in the Black community from COVID. And now that the vaccine is available, we are seeing other individuals swooping into minority communities to sign up for and receive the vaccine allocated for these communities. Not only are we continuing to fight for access, but we are fighting to spread the word about the efficacy of the vaccines and keeping our communities safe. I'm so grateful for organizations like the Black Coalition Against COVID that has assembled Black experts from across the country to inform our constituents and the Black community about the dangers of COVID and the importance of the vaccine, as well as taking the time to answer questions you might have about its effects. While we're trying to vaccinate most Americans, Black people are still behind. According to the CDC statistics, we are 13% of the population, but only 7% of those who have been vaccinated. So I think this conversation tonight comes at a very critical time. I'm looking forward to the discussion with our panel of experts. And for those of you who have questions this evening, we will have a dedicated time after the panelists' presentations to answer any questions in the chat that have not previously or adequately been addressed. Now I have the pleasure of turning the program back over to our host, Dr. Frederick. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Kelly, and we also thank you for all the work that you and the rest of the Congressional Black Caucus have been doing on behalf of Americans. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce Marcella Nunez-Smith. She is the chair of the COVID-19 Health Equity Task Force and senior advisor to the White House COVID-19 response team. Dr. Nunez-Smith and her team have been working tirelessly to ensure that health equity has remained at the forefront of this fight against COVID. So with that in mind, Dr. Nunez-Smith, thanks for joining us. What is the important message that you and the Biden-Harris administration want to convey to the Black community at this very important moment in the course of this pandemic as we're approaching that one-year anniversary?
We certainly are. It's a great pleasure to be here and to see you, Dr. Frederick. And I want to just echo my thanks to the Black Coalition Against COVID for this event, as well as to the Congressional Black Caucus and the Brain Trust, of course, for the great leadership, and to Representative Kelly. You know, we have one message, that is get vaccinated. We are so very fortunate right now to have three, count them, 3 vaccines that have been authorized for emergency use in our country. That is just monumental. This is a historic moment, and it's a blessing. And so we need to take advantage of that. I don't have to tell anyone just how hard and devastating this past year has been in our communities. And to be able to say now that we have 3 vaccines that are safe and effective, get vaccinated.
All right. That message is loud and clear. Now, we have heard a lot about the Black community's resistance to being vaccinated. What are the latest estimates on vaccine hesitancy versus acceptance? And is the trend reversing towards more acceptance in the terms of the data that you're seeing?
Yeah. So I actually was looking at these data earlier today, and I want to, take a moment just to acknowledge all of the wonderful data partners and leaders out there who are making sure that we have this information, such as, KFF and others. Looking at the KFF data in particular, and I will say this is fast moving. So the numbers as they were in November and December are not the numbers as they are now. We see vaccine confidence growing overall, and that is very positive news. But we do have to look a little bit closer and look, for instance, by age. So if we take those who are over 65 years of age and look by race and ethnicity, we see that it's pretty close there between Black and white Americans. Those over 65, about 75% Black Americans as well as white Americans say they've either been vaccinated or will get the vaccine as soon as they can. But we do see, however, some gaps in the younger ages. So those who are age 18 to 49 specifically, we see about a quarter of Black adults saying that they would get the vaccine and they intend to get it, compared really to about 50% of white adults age 18 to 49. So, there's that gap there, but overall there's work to do. But it's really encouraging and great to see that for those who might be at highest risk for severe COVID-19, those over 65, we see vaccine confidence at very high levels among everybody, including Black Americans.
Today, President Biden had a historic announcement showing 2 major pharmaceutical companies, which for all intents and purposes, we've always seen as rivals and competitors, coming together. I think it was a monumental moment. How confident are you that the administration will be able to coordinate all of the stages in the vaccine administration process, from manufacturing to shots in arms? And what in particular gives you that confidence? It seems like it's a logistics and supply chain issue as well.
Yeah, no, I'm highly confident in the ability, and I'm highly confident because I see it every day. We all see it every day, the progress that's being made. It's really true that, the prior administration perhaps didn't have a robust plan for getting from vaccine to vaccination. And the Biden-Harris administration has come in and is focused on vaccination as well as increasing the vaccine supply. President Biden early on set a goal for 100 million shots in 100 days, well on the way there. We're up around 2 million shots every day across our country. That is progress. We have in our leadership 2 folks who are extremely committed at centering equity in this work, and that's our vice president and our president. You mentioned just now what the president has done, pushing on supply, having the announcement today, not just of the Merck and J&J collaboration, but asking and requesting and ordering 100 million more doses of J&J. That's absolute progress. The vice president just this week announced $250 million in funding to go to localities to help make sure people have the information they need to stay safe from COVID in some of the communities that have been hardest hit, including communities of color. That is progress. And here we are with a 3rd vaccine, as we started off talking about. So supply is really ramping and coming down the pike. That's progress. So I have a high degree of confidence in the administration and in the administration's focus on equity.
And certainly Vice President Harris, who I had the opportunity to see just yesterday, being an alumna of Howard University, I have to give her a shout out. But more importantly, that she had her first shot given at United Medical Center in Southeast DC, in a community where some 90% of the residents are African American. So certainly they're leading by example. We know that distrust has been a big reason many African Americans are not eager to accept vaccination. What do you say to them?
Yes, I hear you. You know, there is no question. We all know that many medical institutions, you know, government and governmental institutions have earned the distrust of African Americans and other communities of color. And so we have to acknowledge that, and full stop. But I also say that that is not the reason for us to deny ourselves access to the latest and best in scientific discovery. And that's where we have to lean in and take the power back. It's important to get all the information that one needs to make a decision about vaccination. But I think just a few key things, right? One is to understand the rigor in the process to get a vaccine approved. You know, no safety steps were skipped at all in this work. We have, in terms of who is involved, diverse scientists at every single stage, whether it's those who are creating the vaccine, those who are part of conducting those clinical trials, reviewing the evidence, part of the policymakers. That's important. You know, that diverse representation is also true in terms of who was in the clinical trials. We see over 30% of people in those late stage clinical trials identifying as people of color. So we all can see ourselves in the people who went through the trials. And in every single one of those groups, the vaccines were found to be safe and to be efficacious, right? To work against the things we really care about the most, that's severe illness and hospitalization and death after full immunity. So, you know, this is what we're doing tonight. These conversations are so important to make sure that people get their questions asked and answered by those that they trust and that they know have their best interests at heart.
You know, to piggyback on that, because this is about education. I have noticed, I've heard you speak in several different arenas, and you've been consistent about the fact that this is about educating people and not trying to force anyone to make a decision. It's about giving them the education, and based on that education, they'll make the right decision. So with that in mind, what do you think are the consequences if the Black community does not get vaccinated, especially at the same rate as others? You now have, what, 3, maybe 4, by the time we finish, 5 states that are going against CDC recommendations for the most part and suggesting that people should be out without masks, for instance. What are the potential consequences for the Black community if they're not vaccinated at the same rates?
Yeah, the consequences are dire, Dr. Frederick. I mean, you know, here we are, we have our toolkit, as you mentioned. We can't walk away yet. We're getting so close. We're asking people just to stay a little bit longer, doing those public health measures that you referenced. We know masks work. We have to continue to do that for now. We know social distancing works. We have to do that for now. But vaccines and vaccinations, those are the most powerful tools in our toolkit. And again, I'm very concerned that we might be denying ourselves. We will focus on access. We know the vaccines are free. We'll make it easy and convenient for people to connect with vaccine. We have to make sure people have that information too, so that they are able to make the best choice for themselves and their families. You know, this is how we will protect ourselves, our loved ones, our communities, is through vaccination. And really, you know, I have to underscore that this is a gamble we don't have to take. We have buried over 500,000 Americans. We have lost loved ones this year. None of us know how that virus will affect us. We have seen people of all ages die. And so please, 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 I beg folks to make that consideration and know that given where we are, it's a choice between the vaccine and the virus is not kind.
Now, with that, the CDC has just given new guidance on what adequately vaccinated citizens can and cannot do, how they can live a normal life to some extent. What are some of the things that unvaccinated people may still have to miss out on that vaccinated people now potentially have the opportunity to participate in?
It's very exciting to have the CDC guidance come out, and the CDC will continue to revisit those and update those as more evidence comes in and as more people get vaccinated. You know, this is the beginning. That's the light that we see as we march towards, you know, our new normal. And we have all sacrificed just so much this year, right? All the special events that we could not gather for, all the loved ones that we could not see. This is our opportunity right now to be able to reclaim our joy. And that's what people who get vaccinated will be able to do. This is about seeing your parents, hugging them close, going out with friends to sports games, gathering to worship, really spending the holidays with your friends and families. I mean, this is really what the vaccination will get you. And so I say, listen, reclaiming our joy, that's something to celebrate.
Well, as we close, I know you have a very busy schedule and you took time out to spend with us. I want to take an opportunity of personal privilege. It's International Women's Month, International Women's Day just a couple of days ago, and you are certainly one of our heroes. And so we want to thank you for all that you've been doing.
Back at you, Dr. Frederick. Thank you for all you're doing. Good night, everyone.
All right, take care. I'd like to take the opportunity now to introduce, I believe Dr. Messonnier is with us. She is the director of the Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases at the CDC and a senior official for the COVID-19 Vaccine Task Force for the CDC's COVID-19 response. I had the pleasure to be with you before, Dr. Messonnier, and we want to welcome you back.
Thank you. It's a little hard to follow Dr. Nunez-Smith, but I'll try my best.
Well, I'll say this, I think we have a lineup that started in the right way with three women that I think my 14-year-old daughter would be happy to emulate. So thank you very much for joining us as well. And I think by the time you're done, the next person will feel just as uncomfortable having to follow you. So let's jump right in. How can we trust that vaccines are safe? They were produced awfully fast. As a matter of fact, the project was termed Operation Warp Speed, which I would say was probably unfortunate, good intentions. But as one of my mentors says, the road to hell is sometimes paved with good intentions. So having said that, how can you assure people that this was not done in a way that was haphazard?
Yeah, I realize that many people may have concerns about the safety of these COVID-19 vaccines because it does seem like they were developed and produced quickly. But that's actually not true. The reason that the vaccines came so quickly is because they were developed based on years and years of research. So the two mRNA vaccines, the technology is not that new, and the research has been going on for decades for studies like influenza and rabies, and in fact, cancer treatment. The viral vector vaccines like the J&J vaccine, scientists began working on those vectors, those methodologies in the 1970s. So the reason the vaccines proceeded so quickly is because of all the preceding science work. In addition, when vaccine development proceeds normally, there are different phases, and in between phases, there are gaps in time while we wait. To make things faster, there was no waiting in between the stages. Things just kept moving and really minimized the time. Also, the government invested in the manufacturing processes even before the studies were done. So all those things are the reasons that the vaccines seem to appear quickly. I want to reassure people that the scientific review process was a normal process. Safety was a top priority. The clinical trials were the same size and the same scale and the same timeline that any clinical trial of any new vaccines. And also, there's a rigorous review process for vaccines. So there is the clinical trial monitoring board, and then there is the FDA's advisory committee. They reviewed the data on an open meeting so that anybody can watch and hear their deliberations. And then CDC's advisory committee, we similarly review the data in an open meeting so anyone can watch. So the goal of all those sessions on all those steps are to ensure that we have extra checks and balances to reassure ourselves and reassure the public about the safety of the vaccine. I got vaccinated myself. My parents are vaccinated, and as soon as they can, my teenagers will be vaccinated. I wouldn't be doing that unless I was completely confident in the safety of these vaccines.
I want to piggyback on something. So you said the science was safe. So that's very good to hear. And obviously, a lot of this was going on years before the pandemic brought us into a situation where we could actually apply the science to a solution. What about the scientific review process? In other words, those not actually involved in the trials and the studies, when we talk about the process that CDC goes through, FDA goes through, are there public citizens on that have no skin in the game, as it were, who really would represent and protect the rest of us?
Yeah, it's really an important process. The 2 advisory committees, the members of those committees are screened so that they don't have a conflict of interest. That means that, for example, if they had an investment in the pharmaceutical company that was making the vaccine, there is at least the likelihood of the appearance of a conflict of interest. So we really make sure that we do careful screening. CDC's advisory committee also has a community member, a non-scientist that's part of the process. And part of the reason for that, for us, is we want to make sure that it's not just a bunch of scientists talking, but that we really understand the real world of how these vaccines are going to be applied. And again, the vaccines are reviewed in an open meeting so that any of the discussions, any of the deliberations are seen by the public, and they can really see how the advisory committee and how its members really think through the science and reassure themselves about the data.
Okay. And with that in mind, we're now hearing about a lot of mutations. You obviously are an expert in respiratory diseases, and I know that how the virus affects the lungs and ultimately compromises one's health is something that you're very, very sensitized to and steeped in. Talk to us a bit about these variants of the virus that are now about, and while the numbers are coming down, there's a concern that these are more infectious variants of the virus. What can you tell us about these?
Yeah, it's a really important question. I'll start by saying that this is a normal part of the process. Viruses do constantly change over time through mutation, and we expect new variants of a virus to occur over time. The multiple variants of the virus have been documented in the United States and globally during the pandemic, including ones from the UK, South Africa, and Brazil. And the concern about some, but not all, but some of these new variants is some of them seem to spread more easily and more quickly than other variants, which may lead to more cases of COVID-19. So the concern is that they could spread more quickly. Another concern, frankly, is that the antibodies generated by vaccination with the currently authorized vaccines might not recognize these variants. And that's why folks are worried. But at this time, we're not seeing any evidence of that. It's something that we need to be following closely. But for now, my best advice to everyone is to go ahead and get the vaccine. We need to be worried about the strains that are circulating now while we continue to study the strains that may be circulating in the future.
All right. I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce and bring in Dr. Bachara Choche, a former commissioner of public health for the city of Chicago, and now the vaccination coordinator for the White House COVID-19 response. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be with you. And Nancy, great to be with you again.
And let me ask you a question, just off the bat. The president made a commitment to have enough vaccines for all U.S. adults by end of May. Today, I would say, doubled down on that by stating that he was going to go out and secure even more vaccines as an absolute reassurance that there would not be a shortage. A very, very aggressive move, and one that I would say many in the healthcare community are probably ecstatic to hear about. With that in mind, what do you think of the progress that's being made that will really get us to having that many vaccines by the end of May?
Well, thank you, Wayne, for the question. And I have to tell you, I've been on the job now for a little over 6 weeks. And the number one question that people ask me all the time, is there going to be enough vaccine? How's the vaccine supply coming along? Are we having more vaccines across our communities? And the president's commitment has been from day one to making sure that we are having enough vaccine to vaccinate America. And over the last few weeks, we continue to make progress on that front. If you remember, a few weeks ago, the president directed Jeff Zients, our vaccine coordinator, and our COVID coordinator, and HHS to purchase 200 million more doses of Pfizer and Moderna. That's 100 million doses of Pfizer, 100 million doses of Moderna. Then the J&J vaccine got approved through an EUA at the FDA. CDC approved it, and now we have 100 million more doses of the J&J vaccine that should be available, should be ready by the end of June. And then on top of that, today, he's directing us to purchase another 100 million doses of J&J. And because of the partnership that's coming together between Merck and J&J, two of the largest pharmaceutical and healthcare companies in the country, we're going to be able to have enough vaccine to vaccinate every adult in this country by May, as opposed to July, which is 2 months ahead of schedule. So I think the availability of vaccine, the access to vaccine is so critical. And I have to tell you, Wayne, over the last few weeks, we continue to work with states, tribes, and territories and make more vaccine available to them so that they make the vaccines available across the country. And if you look back at late in January, states, tribes, and territories were getting about 8.6 million doses weekly of Pfizer and Moderna. As of this morning, now they're getting 15.8 million doses of Pfizer and Moderna. That's over 80% increase compared to just a few weeks back. And also over the last few weeks, we started a federal retail pharmacy program. That one is getting about 2.4, actually even a little bit more, million first doses of Pfizer and Moderna every week. We started the community health center program that's delivering vaccines into our community health centers across the country. So the commitment to making sure that there is enough vaccine in our community to vaccinate people in this country is a top one priority for us.
No, I want to stay with you for 1 second here. You mentioned Johnson & Johnson vaccine as the third vaccine. So it's one shot. Again, today, we started off with 2 vaccines. There were 2 shots. We were educated about why we needed the second shot. And here we are now with a new vaccine that's 1 shot. The other thing that I'd like you to comment on is the fact that those first 2 had an efficacy of 95% is what we put out. And now we're told that Johnson & Johnson is somewhere in the mid-70s. Would you please expand on that for the public? And then subsequent to that, I'd like Dr. Messonnier to talk about the effectiveness of the vaccines potentially against the variant, since you had just commented on the variant. So Dr. Choker, maybe you could start first with the Johnson & Johnson and its effectiveness.
All right, so I'll start and then Nancy will take it from there. So let me start by saying I'm really excited about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And I do want to touch out on the rollout of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. But let me start by highlighting a few key points here. First, and as the FDA and the CDC have ruled, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is safe and is highly effective. So now we have 3 approved vaccines in this country. All 3 are safe. All 3 are highly effective. And if you hear Dr. Fauci talking or Dr. Walensky, our CDC director, Dr. Messonnier and others, all of our medical experts will tell you that we should encourage everyone to get the vaccine that's available when it's their turn. All 3 vaccines are safe. All 3 vaccines are equally effective. The second point I do want to make, Wayne, here is that every vaccine is for every community. And it's our job that no community should feel that a vaccine was made unavailable to them. So we are distributing the J&J vaccine the same way we distribute Pfizer vaccine, the same way we distribute the Moderna vaccine, and that's proportional to the state's population and through our federal channel. And I think, when you look at our existing channels, whether it's states, tribes, and territories, our federal retail pharmacy program, our community vaccination sites, our community health centers, we want all 3 vaccines to be distributed evenly, distributed quickly, and distributed as widely as possible. And that's our philosophy behind the distribution of the J&J vaccine. So for example, if your state is, generally speaking, makes up 5% of the population, that state's going to get 5% of the Pfizer vaccine, 5% of the Moderna vaccine, and 5% of the J&J allocation every week. And then the last point I'll make, and then I'll turn over to Nancy, to Dr. Messonnier. We do believe that people should know which vaccine they're getting as early in the process of signing up for the vaccine as possible. And I know that most states, most providers are putting systems in place to be able to allow a person to know which vaccine they're going to be getting as early in the process as possible. And then I'll conclude by just reminding everybody, all 3 vaccines are effective, highly effective, they're all safe, and people should get the vaccine that's available to them when it's their turn. And with that, I'll turn over to Dr. Messonnier.
Great, thank you. So I think the question, Wayne, was, are the vaccines, and especially the J&J vaccine, effective against the virus variants that we were talking about? Sure. So there's sort of 2 pieces to this. One is CDC does have systems in place to monitor how common these variants are and to look for the emergence of additional new variants. The current data suggests that for most variants, the vaccine protection against COVID-19 from J&J as well as from the other mRNA vaccine shouldn't be affected. But there is some preliminary data that some of the vaccines approved for use outside of the US may be less effective against the B.1.351 variant, which is basically a variant that's found in South Africa. It's obviously concerning globally, something that we're going to be watching closely for in the US. It's not a reality right now in terms of the strains that are circulating and the vaccines that we're using. That's why we're going to have to be monitoring this closely.
You know, I'd like to bring Ms. Debra Fraser Howze into the conversation. You're known to many of us as the founder and former CEO of the National Black Leadership Commission on AIDS, and now you lead the faith-based Choose Healthy Life Black Clergy Action Plan. One of the things that is absolutely clear to us is getting community-based Black organizations involved. Tell us what the Choose Healthy Life Black Clergy Action Plan is about.
Thank you, Dr. Frederick. First, I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues over here, Nancy Messonnier and Dr. Kara, who've been working with me very closely at the CDC in trying to ensure that we do the right thing by the community and get funding into the community so that the community can be involved and be part of the marshal of shots in arms in our community, particularly in those areas where people may be a little hesitant, may have decided, as Dr. Nunez-Smith said in the beginning of this, we do have some issues in specific age groups, though not in others, and we're doing much better. So let me tell you a little bit about Choose Healthy Life as one of those community programs. Choose Healthy Life comes out of Deuteronomy. Choose life so that thou and thy seed shall live. It comes out of the Bible, and the focus is actually to tell the community that they have the power to choose life over death. They have the power to make decisions like getting a vaccine and getting tested. They have the power to choose life over death. So the program has funded 50 Black churches in 5 cities: New York, Newark, Detroit, Washington, D.C., and Atlanta, Georgia. Our 2 co-chairs were on last night, Reverend Calvin Butts and Reverend Al Sharpton. In Atlanta, Georgia, the chair of our city initiative in Atlanta, Georgia, is Reverend Senator now Raphael Warnock. We've again funded 50 churches, 10 per city, to hire 50 public health navigators on the ground full time in the churches. And each church gets an additional expense grant. And it all comes from a multi-million-dollar grant that we acquired from Quest Diagnostics to do testing and now vaccine distribution on the ground. And we're also expanding to look at things like obesity, hypertension, and diabetes. The program, as you said, is funded after the National Black Leadership Commission on AIDS, which I founded in 1987, and we worked to address AIDS, and we did it very successfully with the clergy. You know, Wayne, one of the things that's really concerning to me is that as we are moving along this COVID journey, COVID's going to end. It's going to be around for a long time, but it won't be killing 500,000 of us anymore and more. But we've been so focused on COVID. You know, I'm still concerned about TB. I'm concerned about AIDS. I'm concerned about hepatitis C. I'm concerned about all those things that we had, those diseases that were our diseases. We actually own those diseases as far as numbers are concerned, unfortunately, that were there before COVID. They will be there after COVID. And in some cases, they've gotten worse during COVID. And we need to ensure that we have community organizations that are not just there for this moment, for such a time as this. Yes, we have to respond to COVID. Yes, we have to be on the front lines of this. Yes, we have to help get shots in arms, but there's something else that we have to do. We have a responsibility to our community and our people to be there for them after this, so that they are never again put in a position where they are so vulnerable to death that they die 6 times more than any other community. We have to address that. That is our responsibility. And we can only do that in partnership with organizations like the Centers for Disease Control. And one of the things that makes Choose Healthy Life different is that we also funded 5 United Ways, one of the United Ways in each city, to give technical support to the churches, helping them to expand their capacity, professionalize them, their public health infrastructure, and preparing them to be able to go after additional grants, because the community trusts them. They are trusted voices, and we need to use them. And in those voices, we have to make sure that those voices understand, they're educated, and they know what to tell the community. So we have experts that are medical experts that are advisors to the program, like Dr. Reed Tuckson, Dr. Lou Sullivan from Morehouse, Dr. Donna Christensen, the former congresswoman from the Virgin Islands and the first Black female doctor of Congress, Dr. Tom Frieden, President Obama's former head of the CDC. They are all special advisors to Choose Healthy Life.
So I appreciate that. I think to kind of bring this full circle, Dr. Messonnier, you know, African Americans in certain communities, we're getting anecdotal feedback, and maybe we could start with Ms. Howze. She can tell us whether or not this is true or happening, or she's heard reports of communities that are predominantly of African American citizenry seeing a totally different citizenry getting vaccinated. Whether it's because of availability or distribution. I don't know if that's anecdotal, Ms. Howze, or maybe you can.
No, it's not anecdotal at all. It's
Right.
not anecdotal at all. And you can go into some of these hospitals that are in the community. I got Reverend Sharpton vaccinated at Harlem Hospital about 2 weeks ago, and was there and saw across the street a number of very well-polished women of a different color, that had come from the Upper East Side at a coffee shop across the street waiting, because they have these apps that sort of tell you where a vaccine may be available if somebody's missed their appointment, waiting to get vaccine. So it's not, and I spoke to the president of Harlem Hospital, and she said it happens every day. And you can't, I mean, I don't hold it against these people. They're doing what they need to do. If they need to try to find vaccine, they're going to find the vaccine. I do have a concern about it, because some of the vaccine, I think, should be distributed by zip code, and those people who should be next in line should come out of that community. But our people also have to be technically aware that their vaccine availabilities, and they have to want to get the vaccine. They can't just not distribute the vaccine. They have to want to get the vaccine, which is what makes it important for the communities to be on the line. But there's that, Dr. Frederick. There's the concern that one of the vaccines is using fetal tissue, and people are saying that they don't want to take it for that reason. There's also, as you know, there's Tuskegee and all the other things that come about. But there's also a really, the last 4 years have been really bombastic to the African American community. We've been told that we come from countries that don't matter. I'm not even going to use the term that was used. We've been beat over the head. We try to vote, they take away the voting boxes. It's wherever we go, however we turn the last 4 years, we've been beaten to death. And the CDC, not Dr. Messonnier and Dr. Becerra, of course, the CDC is coming back because the CDC for a while there was giving out information that was very confusing and not the best. So there's a relationship that needs to be built over again. And that's one of the things we want. We want them to fund the people who are doing the work on the ground. We want them to be flexible and not tell us that they're doing things because they've always done it this way. We want them to listen to the community, follow public health protocol, do things based on sound data, and help us to help them. And these two people here with me tonight have been doing that. And it is hopeful that they will open the way for all the people at CDC to do that.
And so with that in mind, I'd like to probably start first with Dr. Messonnier. I think Ms. Howze has laid out as clear as day what the challenges are. How do you think the program that exists right now can address that and overcome? And I'd also like Dr. Chair to respond to the same question.
Yeah, I want to start by saying that what we're trying to do is hard, and we should accept that responsibility. Trying to vaccinate the entire country in 6 months is an incredibly ambitious but achievable goal, and there are going to be bumps along the way, and we just need to start by understanding that it's going to be hard and we're going to be imperfect. A lot of the early rollout of this vaccine has been completely framed around a time of insufficient vaccine supply, which has really led to a lot of, I think, the complications with folks needing to schedule online and having to be IT literate, and the ways in which the vaccine program has tried to do speed. I think as we move past this stage of insufficient supply within the next 4 to 6 weeks, we're going to be at a place where there's a lot more supply, which I think gives more flexibility. The challenges that are coming up are the challenges that are not separate but together, of access and hesitancy. If people are very motivated to get vaccinated, they will get vaccinated even if it is difficult to get. But if folks have even the slightest bit of hesitancy, if they're unsure, if they have concerns about safety, if they're unsure of their own risk, they need to have vaccine closer to them that really helps folks go ahead and get vaccinated. And so to me, the issue here is we need to make it easy for people to do the right thing, and we need to help build faith in the vaccine, the vaccinator, and the vaccine program. This is about both making sure that people get the right information so that when they arrive for their vaccine, they're ready to roll up their sleeve, and making it easy for them to get there. And I think community organizers have a huge role to play. It is people who are already trusted by a community who can help us figure out where the most effective and efficient place to get vaccinated is, but also by educating them and making sure they have the right facts and figures, they're best placed to actually be the messenger to their own communities. So community organizers are incredibly important in this next phase, both for access, but also to build confidence in the vaccine.
And Dr. Choke, as we close the segment, obviously Dr. Messonnier gave us a pretty robust response. You are at the tip of the spear, as it were, in terms of where these vaccines land, in terms of locales. Any closing remarks?
Well, I have to tell you, Dr. Frederick, it's always hard to be speak right after Ms. Howze and Dr. Messonnier. But I have to tell you, I mean, as a country, over the last few weeks, we've made really good progress on the vaccination front. mean, as of this morning, more than 95.7 million doses of vaccine have been administered in this country. 1 in 4 adults in this country have had at least one dose. When you look at people 65 and older, over 60% of people 65 and older have gotten at least one dose. Over 70% of people 75 and older have gotten at least one dose. So we're making good progress. We still have ways to go, but we're making good progress. But one thing I'll end up with, we have to continue to focus on equity. We have to keep equity as the cornerstone of our vaccination strategy. And I know Dr. Marcella Nunez-Smith was earlier on this program, and I know she shared some of the efforts that we're doing on the ground to support this equitable distribution of the vaccine. Because at the end of the day, it's the work that Debra described that's going to get us to a point where this vaccine is administered in an equitable way. So thank you for having me here. And it's always great to be with both of you, Nancy and Debra. And thank you, Wayne, for hosting this.
And again, thanks to the two of you. The work that you're doing is tremendously important. Ms. Howze, I have to take a personal privilege as well to say that your work has continued from AIDS to COVID. And as you said, beyond COVID, we'll have to do several other things. Nancy and Bachara, public service is something that I think we need to elevate to our young people. Yes. And so when we talk about our superheroes and our entertainers in our communities, our mentors, you're the types of people that we need to be putting in front of our children. So thanks for all that you're doing. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Good night. It's my distinct privilege to introduce Congresswoman Joyce Beatty from the 3rd Congressional District of Ohio and chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. And as we speak about public servants, there probably is no one more important and astute around these issues as Congresswoman Beatty. So welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Frederick. It's indeed my honor to be here, fresh from Washington, D.C. I've had the opportunity to listen to much of the program tonight. And let me just say, on behalf of the Congressional Black Caucus, what an honor it is for me to participate in this, because we know all too well of how this affects Black Americans. When we think about the disparities, that we make up 12% of the American population, and yet we were dying at a higher percentage due to COVID-19. The Congressional Black Caucus wanted to make sure, as we start talking about getting vaccinations and how we should make sure that there is equity in our communities, there was no one better than Congresswoman Robin Kelly to lead this charge. So we asked her if she would chair, along with Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson, our healthcare domestic policy council dealing with COVID-19 and making sure that our communities get vaccinated. So when we think about the Black Coalition Against COVID-19 and all the partners tonight, all of the universities, and certainly starting right there, Mr. President, with Howard University, and whether it is Morehouse Medical College, whether it is all of the other universities and medical centers and physicians. We say thank you. And let me just leave you with this message that the Congressional Black Caucus will be doing. We will be continuing our partnership through the leadership of Congresswoman Robin Kelly. We will be going back home into our districts, into our communities, and making sure that we are in the forefront of the leadership, because I heard so many of the people on the panel today saying we have to make sure that there's equity. We have to make sure that we deal with the lack of trust factor. So many of our communities and so many of our African Americans and other minorities were hesitant about getting the vaccine because they remembered the Tuskegee experiment. They remembered Henrietta Lacks. But here's the good news I'll end on. Congressional Black Caucus members, like so many of you, rolled up your sleeves and got that first shot and then that second shot. And so we have gone viral through the Congressional Black Caucus by showing the members in our community that we will lead by example, because we know it will make a difference. And I want to thank you for all the data, the statistics, because education is so important for us to let people know. It makes us safer. And also, we want to thank the Biden-Harris administration for having such a goal to make sure within his 100 days, 100 million people would be vaccinated. So with that, I thank you for letting the Congressional Black Caucus be a partner with you. And let me just say, again, thank you to Congresswoman Robin Kelly, who is a leader, who has traveled the state, not only as our chair, but she is also the chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus Health Brain Trust. She is a real sojourner truth for us. Thank you so much, Dr. Fredericks, for all that you have done and will continue to do.
And thank you again, Congresswoman Beatty. You and the Congressional Black Caucus are stalwarts for our community, and we certainly appreciate all the work that you're doing and stand right behind you in any way to assist and to help. So thanks again for doing this tonight. I'd like to take an opportunity to, again, just recognize the National Urban League and the fact that they have partnered with us tonight to ensure that this conversation can take place as well. And I believe that the president of the National Urban League, Mark Morial, is here with us tonight to bring his greetings and add to this very critical and important conversation. So, Mr. Morial, good to see you again.
Dr. Frederick, good to see you again. And it was very, very powerful to be on campus with you yesterday for Mr. Jordan's celebration of life and homegoing service. Thank you for hosting that.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. It was good to have you. So please.
Yeah, let me just offer a few thoughts. And first, it's a great deal of appreciation to you, Dr. Frederick, as well as the leaders at Howard and all of the Black medical schools across the land, the four, the National Medical Association, the National Nurses Association, blackdoctors.org, Reed Tuckson, so many, and the Congressional Black Caucus. Congratulations to them for today, helping secure the passage of the COVID relief bill. I'm pleased to just share with everyone very quickly that in conjunction with the CBC and the CHC and the Congressional Pacific Islander Caucus, we just received back the results of some research, a portion of which was done by Cornell Belcher, who many know and respect as a leading pollster here in the United States, to test the issue of trust and hesitancy around the COVID-19 vaccine among Black, Latinx, Asian American, and other people of color in this community. And we found out from this extensive research that nearly 70%, I think it's 67 to be precise, percent of African Americans express a desire to be vaccinated, with about 25 or 30 expressing trust and hesitancy issues. What does this mean? Our takeaway is that we are facing a challenge of access, and to the extent that cities and states and now FEMA, who will be standing up these mass vaccination sites funded by this COVID bill, clear, if you will, concordance with us, we've got to ensure that there are vaccine sites in communities all across the land so that people can get access to this vaccine. Secondly, states, cities, and counties, because there's new money coming into them, should deploy mobile vaccine units. This has been used in a number of other countries with great success. Let's take the vaccine into the neighborhoods. Let's take it to neighborhoods. Let's make it available to people on a first come, first served basis. Let's not only require people to make an appointment. Let's allow those who want to make an appointment, who have a computer, who have the connection, a broadband connection. But let's create an opportunity for people to do otherwise. So I am always proud to be a part of this discussion. The National Urban League is working as hard as we can with each of you to make sure that our communities are safe and healthy. This pandemic has been devastating. Its impact on our lives, its impact on our loved ones, its impact on our jobs, its impact on our children is significant. And we've got a huge task to rebuild and move us towards healthier and safer communities. So, Dr. Frederick, thank you to you and to all for having me tonight.
Again, thanks for joining us. I want to assure you that there's an HBCU University sweatshirt on the way to you.
Oh, yeah. I should have on my Howard sweatshirt.
That's okay. That's okay. It's very good to see you.
Yes.
We thank you and all of the chapters of the National Urban League for the work that you're doing in the community. The blocking and tackling has been extremely important. So thanks very, very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Frederick. Thank you so much.
It's now my pleasure. Tuckson, who is a co-founder of the Black Coalition Against COVID, and he will moderate this next panel, which will focus on the questions that you have raised or that we know are on your mind. But before Dr. Tuckson starts, I want to take the opportunity as well to say that yesterday at Vernon Jordan's memorial funeral homegoing services, one of the things that came up in Bill Clinton's his eulogy was, who is going to show up? Who shall we call? And I think while we did not specifically call for Dr. Tuckson, we needed a Dr. Tuckson to lead an effort like this. And so, Dr. Tuckson, I want to thank you, as many of our civil rights heroes who have gone before us have done. You have stepped up to the plate with the Black Coalition Against COVID, and we appreciate the work that you're doing and getting the word out, as well as, to be quite frank, getting more vaccines in Black and brown arms. So we appreciate that very much.
Well, that was very, very generous and kind of you. And I thank you so very much. And so, yes, we have been soliciting through the Congressional Black Caucus before the show the questions that are on your mind. And we've been trying to follow also on the chat lines on both Facebook and YouTube for the questions that you have on your minds. And so we're going to get right to it. I have a great panel here. Dr. Donald Alcendor, Associate Professor, Center for AIDS and Health Disparities. He's an immunologist and a physiologist at Meharry Medical College and a former member of the FDA Antiviral Drugs Advisory Board. Dr. C.M. Magoo, Medical Director for the Center for Infectious Disease Management and Research at Howard University's College of Medicine. Dr. Lily Immergluck, Professor of Microbiology, Biochemistry, and Immunology at Morehouse. And Dr. Melissa Clark, an expert in population health and one of the co-founders of the Black Coalition Against COVID. And so we want to get right to it. And let me start right off with Dr. Alcendor. Can you just sort of remind us, what is a virus in very simple terms? What is a virus and what does it mean when we hear that it mutates?
So when we think about a virus, we have to think about a parasite to the cells in our body. And this is a parasite that is completely dependent on our cells to replicate or copy itself. And so a virus basically redirects all of the cell programming to make more virus, to put the cell at the mercy of making more virus. And when we say that a virus mutates, we say that a virus mutates as part of its normal replication cycle. So as the virus copies itself, it makes mistakes. And these mistakes turn out to be mutations that occur in the viral genome. And these mistakes represent changes in the virus glycoprotein that can actually enhance infectivity, or what we call enhanced virulence, or the ability of the virus to cause disease.
Thank you so much. And let me turn to Dr. Magoo and talk a little bit about what is a vaccine and how does a vaccine work on these viruses that we just heard described.
Good evening, Dr. Tuckson. Thank you very much. It's always great to be on these town halls. So a vaccine, in simple language, it's a substance that protects us from an infection. So I just want to make this clear because it comes up all the time. It's for protection, prevention, and it's not treatment. So basically, it can be a weakened or a dead virus that we get injected with, and it safely exposes us to the infection, to whether a virus or bacteria. And then our immune system starts getting prepped up and starts producing antibodies, so that when we have, when we get infected or have the real infection, we have antibodies ready to fight the infection.
Outstanding. And Dr. Immergluck, help us to understand, we've got these three vaccines that we've been hearing about. Are they much different between the three of them?
So the three vaccines that are out there for FDA approved for emergency use authorization, they use different platforms, but they are all doing targeting the spike protein, which is a component of the coronavirus. So ultimately, the goal is to generate the immune response that we want to have to this component of the virus, but we're using different platforms to create this vaccine product. Great.
And so do you, by the way, just as a follow-up on that, do you see any difference between the three of them in terms of whether you would recommend one over the other?
So, we are, I know people are concerned about the variants and the efficacy tied to the vaccine products that are out there, but I would say to you that all of them have demonstrated vaccine efficacy against moderate to severe disease. And so that all of them, if you can get any of them, we should do it.
Thanks. And Dr. Clark, one of the things I know you have been paying a lot of attention to was how these vaccines were created so rapidly. Our audience is several questions that really come in on that is help us to understand how this could happen so quickly.
Yeah, Dr. Tuckson, great question, and thank you for having me again. So, the technology to create these vaccines existed for many years. Scientists around the world have been working on the messenger RNA platform, the DNA platform, which are just the fancy words for the instructions for how viruses make themselves. And using these viral vector platforms, which is just the way that the vaccine gets into the body, the genetic material gets into the body through another virus, for example. So these things have pre-existed, and because of all the resources being poured into the development of this vaccine, it was able to be accelerated. And so we really shouldn't be concerned, because we know that there was a lot of work that went into developing these platforms before the coronavirus, and because of the resources poured into the development, that's why we were able to get it to where we were able to use it and get it authorized for use now.
That's great. And I think also, if I recall, the world had a surveillance system in place early on after our experiences with the SARS and the Ebola experience. And so we were able to identify, I think, this virus, this COVID-19 virus very early. Is that right?
Yes, that is right. And the other thing that I wanted to say too is, there's a lot of myths around the word nanotechnology. Nano just means little. It's just the ability to work in a small space. It's what has allowed the computing power that used to exist in a huge room to now exist in our cell phone or on our Apple Watch. And so that is really that science of nanotechnology is what has allowed us to work with genetic material and be able to deliver it through vaccines in a very efficient and effective way.
Good. I'm going to turn to you, Dr. Alcendor, but I just want to also make people aware. We hear these words like nanotechnology, and it makes a lot of us anxious, as Dr. Clark has said. Nanotechnology is used in so many different medical products. When you go get an MRI scan and you have a dye injected, that uses that kind of technology. The cancer chemotherapy uses that. So these are words that we're just not familiar with, but because we're not, we get concerned. But Dr. Alcendor, in addition to your commenting on why we did it so rapidly, I know you used to be one of the parts of your background is working at the FDA, and people want to understand whether or not these vaccines have been safe, and is the process of FDA approval, has that been adequate? And you have a particular insight in that because you've worked there.
Yes. So thank you. So what happens is that once the vaccine it goes through all of its phases, then it's been screened by the companies and then goes on to the Data Safety Monitoring Board. The Data Safety Monitoring Board are a group of individuals that are impartial, and they have a lot of expertise. And then after getting the green light from the Data Safety Monitoring Board, it goes on to the FDA Advisory Board that I had the opportunity to be a part of. The FDA Advisory Board can be as many as 20 different scientists, and they are going to review all of the clinical details of the study coming out of phase 3 of the clinical trial. They will look for any evidence of the vaccine not being safe or causing any kind of side effects. And the recommendation from the FDA Advisory Board is then passed on to the FDA. The FDA will then review it and give their recommendation. After that recommendation, then it goes to the CDC Advisory Board. So what I'm saying, there's no shortcuts in oversight of these vaccines. These vaccines are going to be vetted in a very serious and very specific way by experts.
Now, you also, people are wondering, Dr. Alcendor, whether or not there are African-American scientists in the review process. And I do believe that there is one of those people involved. Is that your university?
Yes, Dr. James Hildreth is the president and CEO of Meharry Medical College, and he sits on the vaccine review board.
Great. And then I think there's also another physician of color. So it is important that our audience understand that there are reputable, serious African-American scientists, and Dr. Hildreth is a virologist himself, just as you are, Dr. Alcendor. And I'm sure you can comment on the veracity of his expertise.
Absolutely. And so Dr. Hildreth, MD, PhD, Johns Hopkins, Phi Beta Kappa. And again, he has done a lot of work in immunology and virology. He's pioneered research in HIV. And of course, he's had a lot of years of experience. He produced a number of scientists coming out of Johns Hopkins. As part of those colleagues, I was fortunate enough to leave Johns Hopkins and go and join him at Meharry as part of a team.
Good. Thank you. And let me turn now to Dr. Magoob. Tell us, a lot of people want to know whether African Americans were involved in the studies, the clinical trials, and whether African American scientists were involved in developing the studies as well, not just on the review board, as Dr. Alcendor has said, but in actually conducting the research.
Yes, so there has been a representation of African Americans in the Pfizer and the Moderna trials. And myself, I'm now the principal investigator at Howard for the Novavax study. And I'm very proud to say that we were able to enroll 30% African Americans and 20% Latinos, which was really, really great, because as we know from previous experiences that the participation of African Americans and minorities is very low. Yes, Black and colored minority researchers are contributing to the research in the COVID-19 vaccine, as well as African Americans and minorities are being represented in the trials.
And from your observations, Dr. Gluck as well, Emma Gluck, did you concur? I mean, are you seeing the same reports in Atlanta that Dr. Magoob is in DC?
Yes. So I do want to point out that our president dean is also involved in the NIH process for these COVID vaccine trial as part of the U.S. COVID Prevention Network. And then although I'm principal investigator at Morehouse School of Medicine, we have an investigator team of physician scientists, as well as our laboratory director for our vaccine trial unit is African American. In our study recently, which we also were part of the Novavax, we had recruited about 60% African Americans, about 6% Latinx folks in this study. So we definitely have tried to listen and understand why there are participants who came to our trial and then go back out and reach out to the community to share their experiences. I think that's really important for us to do and be a trusted source for our community.
Excellent point. Dr. Clark, we're hearing some people mention that there may be some bad stuff in these viruses. And I've heard all kinds of things, including it was alluded to earlier by Debra Fraser Howze, that some people have this understanding that fetal tissue is somehow involved in these vaccines. Can you help to clarify what's going on here?
Yeah, excellent question. The Pfizer and Moderna vaccines actually have only fats, sugars, and salts, which are used to stabilize it. And then, of course, that genetic material for the spike protein that tells you, it tells the cell exactly how to make the spike protein so that your body can recognize it. It's essentially teaching it how to recognize the coronavirus. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine works slightly differently. It involves a virus, and I mentioned that before, the cold virus, that is basically used as the car or the Lyft, the Uber, to get the genetic material for the spike protein from the coronavirus into the body. In order to grow that virus in sufficient quantities, there were human cell lines that were used in order to do that dated back, to the 70s. So basically cells that had been used, but they are not included in the actual vaccination. And so we even see that Catholic leaders around the world, the Pope, for example, says, it's fine. It's more important to get vaccinated so that you will not contribute to the spread of the coronavirus, and you'll also protect yourself. It's more important than how it was actually made.
So absolutely, let's be really, really clear. These rumors about fetal tissue and other junk inside this vaccine are not true.
Yes, and they are not contained in the vaccine.
Good. While I have you, Dr. Clark, let me ask you really quickly about something a term that I find unfortunate, but side effects from getting the virus. What do we need to understand about what are some of the things that happen to us once to many of us after we get injected with the vaccine?
So it's important to realize that when you have a fever and achiness, that is actually a response to that your immune system is actually working to fight off or to recognize whatever is invading your body. So when you get those effects after the vaccine, and not everybody gets them, actually it's uncommon for people over 55 to get them, a little more common for people under 55 to get them. When you get them, it means that your body is responding to the vaccination as it should. And those effects of headache, fever, chills, body aches that you might get last for a short period of time, a day or two. They're treatable with common anti-fever medications and anti-pain medications. And, most time, people basically are over it again within a day or two. I've had both vaccinations, both doses of the Moderna. I experienced those effects my second time taking it. And again, after a day, I was fine.
And I've had both of my doses, and the only thing that I noticed was a little fatigue and a little teeny bit of soreness in my arm, and that was about it. Dr. Alcendor, you are an expert on virology. People are worried about allergies. What do we need to know about whether or not a person should get the vaccine if they have an allergy?
So if you have an allergy, or say where you need an EpiPen to the point where the allergy is severe, and that if you were to encounter the antigen that triggers the allergy, you would develop anaphylactic shock and have a bad situation. So if you're approaching getting a vaccine and you know that you're allergic, let's say you have a peanut allergy where you have to carry around an EpiPen, the vaccine administrators need to know about this. You need to tell them, and they will have precautions in hand. So if you're at a Kroger and you're getting a vaccine at a Kroger, they will ask you these questions and you have to answer them to the best of your ability. And if there's a problem, they will have epinephrine on hand to treat you if you were to have the beginnings of an allergic attack. And of course, they're also going to make you wait around for as long as 30 minutes sometimes. It's usually 15, but sometimes 30, to see if you're going to be okay. And again, you want to be sure that after about 4 hours that you're still okay and not experiencing any signs of anaphylaxis.
And one of the important things is, obviously, as we heard what Dr. Shokar said, there's almost 90 million people that have gotten at least one dose, and we are not seeing any real significant problems. And so people need to remember that. 90-some million doses, and you're not seeing problems. We're going to go really, really fast with really quick ones, but these questions are easy to answer. Number one, Dr. Magoob, can the vaccine give you COVID?
No, that's not true, because the vaccine does not contain the actual virus.
Absolutely clear cut. Let's say it again. Dr. Magoob, can the vaccine give you COVID?
No, the vaccine does not contain the actual virus. So please go and get vaccinated.
Dr. Immergluck, do we have any idea how effective or how long is the immunity from the virus? Will we need to have a booster?
That's a really good question, and the short answer is we don't know. We're kind of monitoring that. The good news is, to me, is that we do feel very confident that if you get vaccinated, as it's recommended, that you will be protected right now and for at least, I'll say, 3+ months.
Great. Dr. Clark, what happens if you've already been infected with COVID-19? Will the vaccine protect me? Do I have to get it?
It's advisable that you do get the vaccine, even if you've had COVID-19, and here's why. Because the variants, we don't know how your body will respond to those variants that Dr. Alcendor described, how they pop up. And so therefore, it's really important. We've seen in Brazil, for example, where people had the original variation of COVID-19, of the coronavirus, and then the Brazil variant came along, and many people unfortunately got it, were hospitalized, and died. We know that your immunity goes down after about 3 months. And so it's recommended that if you do get vaccinated, that you get vaccinated, after having COVID-19, that you do it anywhere from 2 weeks to 90 days after having COVID-19.
All right. Well, we're getting ready to have to take a cut off our section here, but we're going to come back for more Q&A from the audience. So we will. But before we do, one in, Dr. Clark, can a person? What if someone is pregnant? Are you able to get the vaccine if you're pregnant?
You are able to get the vaccine if you're pregnant. The American College of OBGYN, ACOG, has recommended that women have the opportunity to get vaccinated because we know that COVID in pregnancy can be very deadly. And so therefore, it's thought that it's more important that women get vaccinated against COVID-19 rather than foregoing it and potentially ending up hospitalized or having some sort of complication related to the pregnancy. So very important. Talk with your OBGYN and make that decision regarding getting vaccinated if you're pregnant.
Terrific. Well, I'll let the panel go, but just know that we have a lot of questions around immunocompromised and also how to build up our immune system. That was a big one. So as I close out this section and turn it back to Dr. Frederick, you can answer this one question as you take the moderator's role, and that is, how will the vaccine affect individuals with sickle cell disease? And we're waiting. Well, maybe if we get another second before Dr. Frederick comes back, we can answer one more quick question. And that question is we had a question about, I'm not old and I'm pretty healthy. I've seen lots of people get COVID and not even get sick, or get a little sick and then get better. Maybe my odds are better and safer just taking the chance and dealing with it if I get sick. So this is somebody who's basically saying that that they feel pretty healthy and they're willing to take their chances. Well, I think you've got a pretty good natural experiment going on in this country. You have now 530,000 people who have died from this disease. Many of them are even in your category. And so taking the Russian roulette is probably not the move when you have a safe and effective vaccine available. When you have a safe and effective vaccine compared to the risk of 520,000 Americans who are dying. And let us also remember that that these variants that we've heard about earlier in the show are particularly important and of particular concern. And so I think that we need to understand that these variants are worrisome. They are more infectious. They more easily pass from one person to the other, and their consequences are more serious. And so I would urge you strongly that you would not play Russian roulette with your life or the people around you. That would be very important. We have another question about whether or not I have to wear my mask, even if I've been vaccinated. That's a very important question. And the answer is we would recommend that you do. And here's why. The vaccine works to prevent you from becoming seriously ill or dying. All three of them do a terrific job of that. Once you get infected with the virus, these vaccines have an extraordinary, overwhelming capability to keep you from becoming sick or from dying. And so what we do not have enough information about is whether or not the vaccine will help keep you from spreading the disease from one person to the other. We have a lot to learn about that. We're learning more. The signs are encouraging, but until we know for sure that having been vaccinated will not cause you to inadvertently spread the virus to other people, we want you to still wear your mask even after being vaccinated. And now I'll hand the podium back to Dr. Frederick. And Dr. Frederick, you are the best person perhaps on our panel to answer the question, how will the vaccine affect individuals with sickle cell disease? And if you have sickle cell disease, should you be afraid to become vaccinated?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Dr. Tuckson. As you know, I have sickle cell anemia. I'm homozygous for sickle cell. And I actually have been vaccinated because I also am a cancer surgeon and continue to operate. So I think it's extremely important that you do that after consulting with your physician, as I did with mine. The side effects that I had were similar to side effects that others have had. But recognizing that people with sickle cell may have other issues that may have arisen in their health because of their sickle cell, you should consult with your physician. But it certainly is safe for people with sickle cell for the most part to receive the vaccine. So now I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce Dr. Shelley McDonald Pinkett. She's the chair of internal medicine here at Howard University Hospital and the hospital's chief medical officer, who regularly is taking care of very ill COVID patients. And along with her, we'll have Ms. Lola Williams, the program manager for COVID-19 response team for COVID-19, convalescent plasma and hyperimmunoglobulin treatments for the federal COVID-19 response team. I think it's very important that we hear from and think about the therapeutics that are out there. So first, let me start with you, Dr. McDonald Pinkett. When people enter the hospital, families are usually denied access for safety reasons and can be with their loved ones. Tell us what it's like being inside the hospital for these patients, and are they completely walled off from their family members, and how are you incorporating their family members in their care to ensure that the right types of advocacy is taking place?
Well, thank you very much for that question. We certainly want to make sure that everyone understands what is happening in the hospitals and what the expectations are should you have a loved one hospitalized during this pandemic. Let's begin with the premise that the professionals who work in the hospital have dedicated their lives to caring for others. They want to ensure the best of care for everyone who is within their scope. And so let's realize that we need to protect our families, we need to protect our professionals. And so to prevent the spread of disease, it's important to limit access. And that's what may occur initially. There are only certain exceptions that many hospitals have taken to allow visitors to enter. Those are to accompany birthing mothers, at those who are terminally ill, or to provide compassionate care, and those who are may have some disability. But those professionals are there. Don't leave our loved ones alone. We know that there are many, many stories of nurses holding hands, of environmental care services having conversations with patients. But those who are positive with COVID may be in a unit separated from other areas, as we said, to limit the potential spread of COVID-19. In those separate units where patients have COVID-19, we try to make sure that they're able to communicate with their families through technology. We may provide tablets so that they can contact their family members and let them know how they are doing. We've asked pastoral care, nursing services, our patient navigators, and our patient advocates help our patients stay in contact with their family members. But every day, there is someone there caring for loved ones, speaking with them, talking with them, holding their hands. And it's not always the nurse or the physician. It may be the person who's delivering the meals, environmental care services, facility services. So the environment is still very warm, protective. Unfortunately, there are limitations to allowing family members to enter the hospital, to preserve the protective equipment that we have, and use it only as necessary to keep our professionals safe. And then in instances where we do allow families to come in to visit, we will also supply them with the personal protective equipment that's needed.
Now, many of the people in the community are concerned about our healthcare professionals, and many people would like an opportunity to be supportive. What do you suggest that people in the community do in order to provide that type of support for our frontline workers?
Well, there have actually been some very nice programs that have taken place. We've had musicians come and play music on the courtyard in front of the hospital. We've had children who've written letters of thanks, cards to all of the caregivers, and we pass them out to everyone. But I always say the best thing to do is to simply say thank you and have it be a heartfelt thank you to those who are caring for your loved ones. There's nothing more appreciated than that. Just a gentle, kind, and sincere show of gratitude from the family members to the caregivers is very important.
I appreciate that. Ms. Williams, I'd like to turn over to you. You have a very important and critical role with the COVID-19 response. Maybe you can explain for our listeners and viewers what that is. And then also, if you can go ahead probably and put in layman terms what convalescent plasma is. What are we talking about when we talk about monoclonal antibodies and the other types of specialized treatments that have been developed against COVID-19?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And it's a pleasure to be here and talking on this forum. So as a program manager, what I do is coordinate public and private partnerships. So all across the government, the Department of Defense, the Department of Health and Human Services, National Institutes of Health, and working with industry to develop and field COVID-19 treatments or therapeutics. I initially came on and my focus had been on COVID-19 convalescent plasma and hyperimmune globulin. And now I've gotten more into the role of working on monoclonal antibodies. And any good program manager, I manage the budget, I make sure things are delivered on time, and making sure that what we say we're delivering actually works. So going into the convalescent plasma, the monoclonal antibodies, hyperimmune globulin, the one thing that they all have in common are antibodies. And monoclonal antibodies are actually lab-made proteins that mimic the immune system, and they're able to fight off, pathogens such as this COVID-19 virus. For a COVID-19 convalescent plasma, or CCP as we'll call it, the blood from people who had the virus and recovered contains these antibodies. And instead of being made in a lab like the monoclonals, they're actually made by the body. And so in the liquid portion of your blood, which is the plasma, that is taken and actually transfused into the patient of someone who has an active COVID-19 infection. And for hyperimmune globulin, it's just taking the CCP and concentrating down those antibodies. So convalescent plasma and hyperimmune globulin give more of a passive immunity, whereas the vaccine gives active immunity.
Mhm. And Dr. Fauci recently, on a couple of these types of events, has said that he has a concern about the lack of use of these therapeutics by the Black community. What is the COVID-19 task force response effort to try to get these therapeutics into the Black community look like?
That's such a great question. And I'm actually really, really excited about all of the good things that we have been working on in order to increase the utilization of all of these different treatment options. I know right now the focus has really been on vaccines, right? So if you can provide a preventative measure and just keep people from getting sick, that's easier. But in the case where, people haven't been vaccinated, we have to also provide treatment options for those. So some of the things that the federal COVID-19 response team is working on is making sure that there's access to these types of treatment options in areas where they may not be access to healthcare. And so those are actually physically standing up sites and working with federally qualified health centers in order to make these treatments available. The monoclonal antibodies are an infusion that needs to be provided in an outpatient setting. And so that's where we're really working on, whereas remdesivir is an antiviral and also COVID-19 convalescent plasma, those can be provided in a hospitalized setting. In addition to that, the most important thing is education, awareness, and outreach. And we're working with a number of stakeholders within industry, not-for-profit organizations in order to get the message out there. There's a lot going on: vaccines, monoclonals, antivirals. What do all of these mean? How does it work? When can they be used? And so that allows for patients to be able to advocate not only for themselves, but also for loved ones. So lots of exciting things that are going on. You'll be hearing, the public will be hearing more about them as these start to become to fruition. But really making sure that there's access in communities that typically didn't have it, and that the patients have the knowledge, as well as the doctors and the clinicians, as far as the options that are out there.
And so with that, I'd like to pose my last question to both of you, Dr. McDonald Pinkett and Ms. Williams. Given the fact that, one, our community needs to be educated about this, what should family members in particular and patients be doing to advocate around getting these therapies in the event that they are unfortunately hospitalized with COVID? Should they be asking for this? We know former President Trump received treatment like this, and since we know it's available, should we be encouraging people to advocate for their family members to receive this treatment when they get hospitalized?
So I say absolutely our family members should advocate for their loved ones. The treatments are available. Family members can ask, does my family member meet the criteria to receive this medication? And if not, ask again, why not? And so, yes, the family members and patients are their own best advocates. As Ms. Williams said, to remain vigilant, remain educated about what is available, and then ask for it and understand why, if it is not available, why should their family member not receive it? I also think it's very important that our patients and our family members remain in contact with their Congress folks and those who advocate for medications for their hospitals.
And Dr. Frederick, I just wanted to add, the government also has a couple of resources and been partnering with industry on a couple of websites that have a wealth of information. The first one is covid.hhs.gov. That talks about all of the treatment options, vaccines, clinical trials, tons of information. And if you want to learn more about COVID-19 convalescent plasma and hyperimmune globulin, you can also go to thefightisinus.org.
And Ms. Williams, I would like you to repeat the first website again a little more slowly,
Okay.
so we put it in our comment section to make sure that our viewers and listeners get that.
Okay, so it's combatcovid.hhs.gov. And that's the government-run website that talks about everything COVID-related, vaccines, treatments, clinical trials. And then for COVID-19 convalescent plasma therapies, you can go to thefightisinus.org.
All right. Thank you once again for joining us. And you can see that we have the website up now on our screen. We thank you very much, Ms. Williams and Dr. McDonald-Pinkett. We thank both of you for all that you're doing and for joining us tonight with such excellent information. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd now like to introduce Dr. David Carlisle. He's the president of the Charles Drew University of Medicine and Science, located in South Central LA, who will moderate the last panel, a discussion on how the Black community can fight for its survival from the perspective of Black health leaders. Now, Dr. Carlisle is one of my colleagues, and so I do want to thank you in advance for doing this as well, Dr. Carlisle. So all yours.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Frederick. Always great to be with you, great to work with you. Dr. Tuxson, also another past president of Charles R. Drew University of Medicine and Science, as well as all the other distinguished colleagues and panelists that you've heard from today. I bring you greetings from the faculty, trustees, and especially the students of Charles R. Drew University of Medicine and Science. You know, when we think about COVID-19 here in South Central Los Angeles, I think one of the things that people have the greatest difficulty kind of getting their arms around is the vastness of South Los Angeles. We are a region of 1 million people, bigger than the city of Boston, bigger than the city of Sacramento, bigger than the city of Honolulu, Seattle, etc. But one of the biggest shortage areas in the entire United States. And indeed, one of our biggest challenges in South Los Angeles is really the lack of healthcare access. When we were doing testing this summer for COVID-19, people were being told, well, if you have a positive test, go talk to your doctor. Well, in South Los Angeles, people don't have a doctor to go to. People don't have a dentist to go to. People don't have a psychiatrist to go to. People don't have a pharmacist to go to. So one of the biggest challenges in South Los Angeles with our million residents is simply getting physical access to healthcare, especially in the era of COVID-19. This is played out now that we're talking about vaccinations and immunizations, because everywhere that I go, where we're giving out, administering the vaccine, there is much, much more demand than there is supply. And that is our biggest conundrum right now in our African-American community and other communities of color in South Los Angeles, is that the demand for immunization greatly exceeds our ability to give it right now. People want to get the vaccine. And I'm really heartened to see that demand. I want to turn to our first panelist here, and this is Dr. Oliver Brooks. And Dr. Brooks is a neighbor of ours at Charles R. Drew University. He works at the Watts Health Center, literally a mile away from our campus. Dr. Brooks is the past president of the National Medical Association and chief medical officer of the Watts Healthcare Corporation. So great to see you, Dr. Brooks.
Good to be here. Good to see you, Dr. Carlisle.
Here's the first question for you. What are the lessons being learned by Black physicians in communicating with the Black community about COVID-19?
Well, excellent forum. Glad to have all of us together as African-American physicians and scholars and advocates. What we are learning is that our role is crucial. We can know what the treatments are. We can know that the vaccine is safe and effective. We can know that testing helps. But if we do not communicate that appropriately, then it will not occur. African Americans and others look to their healthcare provider as the most trusted source of health information. And in a pandemic, when there is mistrust, it is crucial that we are there to do the communication. So forums like this, we can go forth after this and communicate with our patients and with the community, are critical to ensuring that those in this 1 million population area that is population dense, that they get vaccinated.
Well, thank you very much. And those are very important points. We'll go on to the next question for you, Dr. Brooks. How important is it that Black health professionals such as us are actively engaged in public health forums like this, and why?
The importance is that there are a lot of misperceptions, there are a lot of facts that we need to know. There's discussion about sickle cell disease, there's been discussion about pregnancy, fertility, HIV, and some of these things relate directly to our community. They are our concerns. So we have to know the facts, and we have to know them, as we know from our history as people, twice as well and know them twice as deeply. So when we get questioned by our community, we can speak with confidence. ACOG says Black women that are pregnant can get vaccinated. Sickle cell disease, someone speaking with sickle cell disease saying, I got vaccinated. So it is these messages that are personal to our culture that we can communicate best, and we learn them through forums such as this.
Great. Let me ask you another question here, particularly as a physician who's been in our community for years, practicing on the front lines of healthcare in, again, one of the largest underserved communities in the entire United States. I know that you're dedicated to the welfare of the community, and not just in Los Angeles, but across the entire country. What do you want to say to this audience that we haven't said so far?
Well, ultimately, with our community, we have to break it down and just get to the end point. Dr. McDonald Pinkett said, we love you, we care about you, trust us if you're in the hospital alone. I will say that we are on your side. We do not have a dog in this fight in terms of one side versus the other. You are our patients. We care about you. Trust us. So what I would say is, beyond everything that you see and you hear, get vaccinated. If you believe that there is some type of conspiracy, some forces that are aligned against you, that somehow the vaccine is going to hurt, if you think people out there to harm you, the worst thing you could do is not get vaccinated. With Tuskegee, the men that were in that program were denied a treatment. Here we have a situation for a pandemic virus where there is a treatment option or a prevention option readily available. Do not avail yourself. Avail yourself of this opportunity to keep yourself and those around you uninfected, alive, and well.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Oliver Brooks, and thank you again for being on the front lines in this battle against this global pandemic called COVID-19. Please stay on board. We may come back to you very shortly. I want to transition now to our next panelist, and this is Dr. Eric Williams, somebody I know very well also, the immediate past president of the National Black Nursing Association and interim associate dean of health sciences at Santa Monica College, right around the corner from Charles R. Drew University of Medicine and Science. Great to see you, Dr. Williams. So let's go on to our first question here. Many people don't realize that when they don't take precautions against COVID and then become seriously ill, they may find themselves being admitted to a hospital where one of your members of the National Black Nurses Association has to take the risky step of caring for them. What is that like, and do you worry about your colleagues when they're in this situation? Having trouble hearing you, Dr. Williams? Okay, we are not picking up audio from you, sir, unfortunately. So let's, why don't we, while we're working on this from the technical perspective, let's go ahead and go back to Dr. Tuckson, and who is somebody, of course, I've known for my entire career, worked with closely, but is also the past president of Charles R. Drew University of Medicine and Science as well. Dr. Tuckson, I just want to say thank you very much for your visionary leadership in bringing us all together and making this happen on behalf of the African American community and everyone else, particularly communities of color, that have been so disproportionately devastated by COVID-19.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Carlisle. Let me just ask you one question and sort of the same thing that you asked your last guest, Dr. Brooks, and that is this. What is it that you think you would like to leave with our audience? I was very struck by something that Dr. Brooks said, and it's important, I think, that the people that are legitimately and rightly upset with the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, we are upset because these men who had syphilis were denied treatment with a drug that we knew would work. In the 1940s, we knew that penicillin would actually treat and cure their disease, and they were denied access to that. It just seems to me paradoxical, David, that those of us who are concerned about Tuskegee would voluntarily decide to deny ourselves access to a drug that would have saved our lives. In other words, we seem to be doing the work of the devil for themselves. And I just think that's such a paradoxical thing. I don't know what thoughts that brings to your mind, sir.
Well, this is, of course, one of the major fiascos of American medicine in the 20th century. But one of the big differences between the 1930s and 40s and 50s all the way into the 1970s and today is that there weren't as many people like you, Dr. Tuckson, like Dr. Brooks, around in positions of leadership. We didn't have African-American biomedical researchers at the NIH the way we do today. And so the point is, as we've said before, we have our communities back, and we are watching to make sure that everything is going as it should be. You know, I don't criticize anyone for being a slow adopter in terms of healthcare technology. That's what I ask people to do, is to ask questions. But we've kind of jumped this process because we have esteemed physicians, several dozen here with us today. And the message is the same from our own community's healthcare experts, which is, please, based on everything that we know, there's only one correct response when offered the COVID-19 vaccination, and that is to take it. Otherwise, you're playing Russian roulette with your life. And please take that vaccination. I think we have Dr. Williams back with us. Sir, are you with us? Dr. Williams, I'm sorry, we're still not picking up audio from you. I know we'll have another occasion, and I would encourage anyone, when you have a chance, to seek out Dr. Williams and listen to his words of wisdom as well. Dr. Tuckson, I think we're going directly to Q&A at this point.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carlisle. And I think Dr. Frederick is back to lead us through, and I think we'll bring in the panel again. And Dr. Frederick, as the panel arrives, the first question that we want to get right to is going to be the issue of immunocompromised status and how to boost up our immune system. And Dr. Clark, who will take herself off mute, is very smart about that. And Dr. Clark, you spend a lot of time with your own special podcast show that goes out to thousands of people every week. What do you say to your audience and your regular shows about how to build up the immune system, and what's the relationship between that and taking the vaccine?
So I say it's not an either or, it's a yes and. So when we're talking about taking the vaccine, what we're talking about is simply teaching our body how to respond to the coronavirus. It's like if you had a pop quiz the next day that you didn't know about, which would be the coronavirus infection, and somebody came to you the night before and said, hey, here are the answers. This is how you answer the test correctly the next day. You'd be like, yeah, that's great. So that's really important no matter how healthy your body is. Work on your health. We do know that. But it is a It is a marathon, not a sprint. We're not going to get there by popping supplements or popping vitamins. It's going to be what I call the 5 self-health actions: eating a healthy diet, getting enough exercise, every day, managing the stressors in your life, drinking enough water every day, and just making sure that you focus on those 5 self-health actions as much as you can within your power each day.
So the
get vaccinated.
The belt and suspenders. What about our panelists? There are some people that are asking about various vitamin supplements like vitamin D. Any thoughts on any of those vitamin supplements that you would suggest people add to their armamentarium?
I would say talk with your doctor to get a vitamin D level. 90% of Americans are actually, and much more frequently among African Americans, are vitamin D deficient. And we see that that is correlated with a variety of chronic diseases, everything from diabetes to even certain cancers. So it is important to know your vitamin D level and then work with your physician to supplement that. You can also get it from nutrition, from eating fatty fish, and you can also get it from the sunlight, from getting at least 15 minutes of sunlight every day.
To the other panelists, any other augmentations to that you want to offer?
I just want to say sleep. I mean, sleep is very important for recovery of the body and everything that goes on in it.
Right. Dr.
I'm sorry, that was one of the 5 self-health actions. I'm sorry, maybe I didn't say it, but thank you so much, Dr. Alcendor, for getting that.
We need that. I certainly need to
very
remember.
Key.
Tell me 3 times because I need to do that more. Dr. Immergluck, what about children? Do we have any idea of when we will have recommendations for children?
Yes. So, we're already about to get ourselves poised to do a vaccine clinical trial with children. And this is a normal progression of any vaccine development. We start with the healthy adults, and we start with adults with some of the risk factors, and then we gradually move down, because if you think about it, if you want to prevent disease, vaccination of the entire population is important. So that is true. Currently, the Pfizer is recommended, or it's FDA approved for 16 and older.
Great. And Dr. Alcendor, Dr. Magoob, we've got women who are wondering about breastfeeding. Are you concerned that women who are breastfeeding should not or should get the vaccine?
Great question, Dr. Tuckson. So the way I'm handling this with my patients in general is the first thing is that they have to get in touch with their primary care physician. But we are trying to make, in my clinic, I'm trying to make joint decisions with my patients. So I tell them I work in the clinic and I work also in the hospital. So I have you either ending up in the hospital, in the ICU, God forbid, and on ventilator and death, versus giving you a vaccine, which we, so far, the only thing that we people can get is fever or fatigue or just some symptoms for 2 or 3 days. So which one should we choose? So this strategy has been working for me very well. There has been a lot of hesitancy, but once people hear that, work with their physicians on a joint decision, I think it works very well. So the short answer is that comparing death versus just taking a vaccine with minimal side effects, I think people should get vaccinated.
Well, as I get ready to turn the program back to Dr. Frederick, I want to give each of you 10 seconds to close out with, as you are all consummate researchers, Dr. Alcendor, Dr. Magoob, and Dr. Immergluck. You are consummate researchers. You understand the science of this disease and the vaccines intimately well. I mean, you are as good as it gets in the world in understanding what's going on. And then Dr. Clark, who is a renowned population health specialist who has a very special expertise. So I'm going to start with you, Dr. Magoob, and then go to Dr. Immergluck, then Alcendor, and then Dr. Clark for just 10 seconds of what's the one thing from your professional expertise you would say to this audience of people who need to know what's important?
It's very important to understand that the vaccine does not give you COVID. it's very important to get vaccinated because this is a deadly disease. So like I said before, the joint decision between the patient and their physician is that you have a choice. So we have a choice, either death or severe infection, ending up in the ICU on a ventilator with very prolonged sequelae, versus just getting the vaccine. And we have heard enough about the vaccine safety, just side effects that you can get 2 to 3 days, and then take some analgesia and people get better. So please go out and get vaccinated. It's safe.
Dr. Immergluck?
Okay. Science is science, and we should let the evidence guide us in our decision making. History has told us that vaccinations can prevent disease among our population. And so we use that to guide us and get through this pandemic. And we're getting closer with every day as we get more and more of our population vaccinated.
Outstanding. Dr. Alcendor?
We have a lot of experience with vaccines. All of us have children that go to public school. They need vaccines to be in public school. They have gotten these vaccines since they were children, until even 18. How many adverse events have we seen in the children that are getting vaccines all over the United States every year? Very few adverse side effects. Get the vaccine and then go and find a person that is hesitant about getting the vaccine and convince them that you didn't have any problems with it.
Thank you. And Dr. Clark?
Yes. As African Americans in this country over the past 400 years, we have not survived and been resilient by not listening to the facts and being able to course correct and change in the face of overwhelming evidence. We've had 90 million vaccinations given, and minimal side effects. It is safe, it is effective, versus 500,000 plus deaths. And so as we're making the choice to get vaccinated, it's important to remember we're doing it not just ourselves and to protect ourselves, but we're doing it for those who we love to help keep them safe as well. So I would just urge all of us to make sure that we have the facts. You can go to Black Coalition Against COVID.org, even after this broadcast, to find additional information and make that decision to get vaccinated. It's the best thing to do so that we no longer have to see the death that we've been enduring.
Thank you so much. Well, I really want to thank Dr. Frederick for having hosted this meeting. He's done a spectacular job, as he always does. He's an extraordinary physician, extraordinary surgeon, and a great moderator. We want to thank the Congressional Black Caucus. They are wonderful. And we owe so much to the advocacy of our legislators who have our back every day. And we've just seen the results of that just yesterday, and as we've seen the results of their work. So thank goodness for the Congressional Black Caucus, and thank all of you for joining us. Thank you, Bio, for the generous educational grant, and also to our friends at blackdoctor.org. Thank you for being our partner. To the audience, we will have more of these. We are ready to help you. All of the 4 Black medical schools, the National Medical Association, the Cobb Institute of the NMA, the National Black Nurses Association, we are all standing by as your experts to give you whatever you need to know from the science and best of expert opinion. We love you. We care about you. You matter to us more than anything. And so look forward to the next shows, and we hope we'll be able to answer your questions in the days and weeks to come. Everybody take care, be safe, wear your mask, wear your mask, wear your mask, and get vaccinated, get vaccinated, get vaccinated when it's your turn. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.